Namo Gurudeva. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharma-activity. Namo Sangaya. Namo Gurudeva. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharma-activity. Namo Sangaya. Namo Gurudeva. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharma-activity. Namo Sangaya. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by practicing generosity and the other far-reaching attitudes, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. During our last session, we were going through verse 6 on page 34. And just as a reminder, this particular verse emphasized and covered the training of morality or ethical discipline. And today we'll be going through the topics and points discussed in verse 7. Hopefully you all had the chance to read this over the holiday. It's a particularly important verse, and you can tell by how elaborate and how the commentary is more extensive. So before we go through the commentary and start discussing the points raised and explained, let us all read the root verse together. Verse 7 on page 35. Just as I have fallen into the ocean of samsara, so too have wandering motherly beings. Seeing this, bless me to develop the altruistic mind that assumes the responsibility to free them all. So, what's being explained and shared in this verse is the training of bodhicitta, or the mind seeking great enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And there's quite a bit of commentary and explanation, and they primarily cover the methods of developing bodhicitta. After having given an explanation of the beginning lines of the verse, and so we'll go ahead and take any questions or points of discussion. Again, hopefully everyone had the opportunity to read them, or had the opportunity to either over the holiday or even previously to that create a sense of familiarization with the concepts. And there, as we go through each sub-portion within the commentary, there are a couple points that, or discussion points that we would, that we're looking to share with you. But to go ahead and start there with analysis of the contents and the explanation of this verse. Is there, are there any particular questions associated to any specific page or portion of the commentary? Yes.
So, the first line of the verse, just as I've fallen into the ocean of samsara, so too have wandering motherly beings. Is it, what are we specifically supposed to recognize that the ocean of samsara is? What sort of awareness is one supposed to have there?
시간 당분 나려야. 거의 자수선 손도스. 또 거의 자선인데 개인기 단다 저어디 나려야. 아니 거기 식사저 이 두시서 직내들이 파 치료 지게 되는 내들이 단지 자주 말스. 아니 거기 소소 즉 나게 주대버티다 아니 게르미 소소단 즉 주딩에 소소는 저기 되게 소리 계기 저와탄 규딩이 기 디니스칸에 두시 샤워스 모두 송도 다요 코랑 단다 저와디르다니 거의 자소스다니 근데 간디스 지 두시 간디 샤워스로 칠로라 메 근데 알리게 알리 칠로 알리 디니시 샤워를 베기지 칠로라 메웨는데 사자 간에 지 디니시 차식메나 아니 간디스 문제 샤워스
코이 자소스 되잖아. 지단 코알라 되잖아. 레닝은 도시에 받을 코알라가 알아. 차번도 지지도 가서 동네 송문하네. 다 동네 송부 지리비고니 에너지 나르디요 받을 코이 자소스. 코이 자소라디 가서 코이 니 요게 가서 그 수불을 되죠게 대용주 아니 심 대서 상황 가르쳐야 돼요. 그래서 되잖아. 가서 코이 뒤비 최차돼요. 그래서 땅안에서 가려요. 소설 르려요. 강의 못해서 참아 가래. 사실 저번에 지지도 장장에 뭐도 좀 코아들 대사죠. 저 사매게 되어 말아. 그래서 다 사실 그 강의 뭐 지가 내년 근도 제샤죠. 인바 인상 때다 거의 자소선 도 시작을 해. 자소라도 做 배샤고요. 배샤셔는 가서 자소나로 파팅론든 주보 용조 주보 용조를 다 자소월 저 진도가 있는 주보 용조를 추이 찹되기로 봐. 딘하신게 아니 가서 가서 거의 닌데네 다 마토 지세도 대세도 아니 가서 영화 유성한테 장화 가르쳐야 되고 사제기 취차 되고 그래서 거의 자소선 것이 해야 되더래. 다 너무 손질이 있네. 나는 여러 번.
So if you refer to the last couple of sentences on page 35, where Krishna mentions that it's not a physical location, and that it is within us from birth and will continue until we find a liberation or find liberation. So within us, when we say within us, or when we say samsara, generally, when we look at that term, what's emphasized or how it's meant to be understood is coming from or influenced by karma and afflictive emotions. So anything that is under the influence of or overwhelmed by or impacted by karma, or within the, I guess, what's the term here? Basically, I mean, I guess to use a rough term, is a slave of karma and afflictive emotions, or to be under the influence, or to be under the command of, or the order of karma and afflictive emotions. So it can be, when we say samsara, that's what the reference is. When we say sara or samsara, or when we start mentioning the suffering affiliated with samsara, it's meant to be understood through that impact or that influence of karma and afflictive emotions.
So chaban de ji dong so dong song yo ba de na la dong so dong ye ni de so des le la ya ra so ke chi shu do kui dong ye so se ya sam da ya de chaban de ji dong sam da wa da versa da gi de suffering conditioning.
So if you so that's kind of the pretense when we think about samsara, like that underlining factor being under the influence or being associated to karma and afflictive emotions. And then when you actually think about, when we say it's within us, how do we pinpoint that? Well, what is it, basically? You can refer to, if you turn to page 36, in the middle there, the fourth paragraph, where it mentions the three types of forms, the three forms of suffering, which are the suffering of change, and the suffering of conditioning. Of those three, samsara can be understood as the suffering of conditioning. This suffering, I believe, is also sometimes translated as all-pervasive suffering. And this can be understood or recognized as I believe it's contaminated or impure. So Yeshamba was mentioning to kind of keep things simple, again, to understand that anything under the influence or under the command, the uncontrollable command of karma and afflictive emotions can be understood as karma. Now when we talk about kind of recognizing what it is or how to, what we're pointing at, when we mention that, again, referring to the three types of suffering there, the suffering of conditioning, that is a reference to, I'm going to look up this term really quickly because I know it comes up a lot, and it's one that I sometimes have trouble remembering. So give me a moment. Conditioned or defiled. So what did I say? I said contaminated or impure.
No, you said contaminated.
It's contaminated,
yeah,
right? Impure, yes. Defiled, yes. So, so any of our aggregates, I guess they're called. Let me find this one. Again, if anyone knows what I'm already talking about and knows the terminology, please let me know. Aggregates that perpetuate defilements. or the 5 aggregates that perpetuate defilements. They can be, that's what the suffering of conditioning or all-pervasive suffering is referring to. And this includes, when we talk about the 5 aggregates, this includes our bodies, and then our impure consciousness, and then what are the other aggregates? Vladimir, can you help me out with the English terminology?
Well, it's body. Wow.
Exactly, form, feeling. That's what I was looking for. Form, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness. So those are known as the 5 aggregates. And so these 5 aggregates that perpetuate defilements can be known as samsara, and also can be referred to as mentioned here, the suffering of conditioning, or all-pervasive suffering, when we mentioned the 3 types of sufferings.
That's all the chilo sano mata susu rani la shinjuche susu la rawan yo kazedo susu jaje jatama susu tanzin shetu ya kazedo ngazo susu singni na luyi na ti dache ti chetu jaje jatama ngazo chetu mara chetu me wa ta hako yong de zan nga zo chi le nye chi chen wang jin ba de so la de susu gang su dache che chen ti chen ti pa rin ri dan de ji sa je yu che tang ju pa rin ri dan de ra.
So one can examine this point or this concept by seeing what is controllable in one's mind and body, in one's surroundings, in one's life. And you'll come to see that there's not a lot that's controllable. And so what is it that is in control, or what is it that is defining how we carry forward and how our minds and bodies change, and so on and so forth. This force, if you will, that dictates that, this kind of control that just almost, if you imagine us on kind of in a straitjacket, like on a roller coaster, you can't do anything, right? If you can, I just threw that out there to kind of give you a visual. And so what is this force that drives that roller coaster, if you will? So this force can be understood as the all-pervasive suffering, or the concept of samsara, when we kind of look for something to pinpoint or to point a finger at. Did that?
That suffering is the force. That particular type of suffering.
Right. As karma and afflictive emotions being. And so, Yoshima was mentioning that the ocean of samsara, as explained here in the commentary, is an example, and it's also mentioned here why the ocean is used as an example and how that applies to the term ocean of samsara. So, yes, hopefully that opened up a couple of branches of seeing seeing how to interpret the term of samsara there.
So you're mainly explaining the suffering of conditioning, right?
Yes.
So these 3 sufferings are probably to be known and to be contemplated on.
Yes. Yes. And then of those 3 is particularly the suffering of conditioning that we call samsara. That is also can also be known as, or when we say what is it that comes from samsara, to basically answer your initial question.
So you would say that's closer to the root of samsara, and then the other 2 types of sufferings are more like symptoms.
Right. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why the term all-pervasive or conditioning can be understood, because all of us are in that experience. When we talk about ocean, that's another one that is affiliated to ocean, the pervasiveness of it. Obviously, the different degrees and different levels of suffering versus, and then also change obviously is very pervasive as well. But when you think about, again, the aggregates that perpetuate defilements or impurities or contamination and cause us to continue to toil and cycle in samsara, That's what we're alluding to.
And would you say it's necessary to know the specific afflictive emotions? You said afflictive emotions and basically just karma, I think you said. Is it necessary to know them so that they can be abandoned?
아니, tanda lenyus la varwas.
Nas.
아니, the nyomo, 아니 탐지, 다직, 먼저 무슨 다직 뭐 가는 강임에다. nyomo 세셔로. nyomo 생기다 뭐 가는 강임에 아니 직, 비긴 직 내다로 강 가는 강임에 규경이다. 어디서 나와서 시험을 개심을 해서 하고 유나스.
그래. 티켓이 뭐라서 답이거나 말이야. 띵은 세마이 송라. 이제 시험시원하니까. 그래서 다 지당 가지를 자고 이렇게 참아를 진짜 따해요. 그래서 배시는 더샤스야도 그런 원문이 아버지 못하나. 그래서 하마거나 아니 콜니에고 된당신 말에 아니 콘도샤 이미 하고 말아. 그래서 매마고치 소소주는 영어 책이거든. 영어 라면다 마고치거든. 영어 책이 하마고 되잖아. 디파 강고시 당신 말아. 되게 침물했어. 근데 지 쉬우지 타심 타와 마시고 했는데 지용이 가서도 너 자신 어떤 송기 처음에 가지도 산나가 소리도 지 처리 마우시어로 봐. this is
yes, so it's important to know about our afflictive emotions with them being the cause of our suffering. Without knowing the faults and the flaws and the causes of our suffering, it's difficult to tackle them, and it's difficult to find a way to free ourselves from them. That concept, in the context of the object of refutation. Is it refutation? 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 Is that the word? Negation is another one, yes. The object of negation is mentioned by the great Shantideva, and the quote is that, the essential meaning of the quote is that without understanding what you're refuting or negating first, it's difficult to think about the process of actually negating it. So likewise, the same concept can be applied to afflictive emotions and karma. So first, in terms of afflictive emotions, yes, the better you know about them, the closer you can get, the more clear things become in terms of tackling how to abandon them. But also, for example, if you're not able to go or fully understand and comprehend each and every detail and nook and cranny, if you will, of what of what consists of afflictive emotions, you can think about. We're at least familiar with the primary ones, including attachment, hatred, and ignorance, so on and so forth. The ones that we experience firsthand on the day-to-day. So we can recognize those and then start familiarizing ourselves with those concepts.
I have a question related to that.
Yes.
What is the relationship between the afflictive emotions and the aggregates, the contaminated aggregates? It is said that I remember three things: that the aggregates they're produced by the afflictive emotions, they are the cause of the afflictive emotions, and the third one is I'm not clear about. They depend on the afflictive emotions. That's the way it's said. Three things. What is that? Maybe you can tell us about that, especially the third one. What is it? It sounds like when I say they depend on the afflictive emotions, that's the same as saying they're produced by the afflictive emotions.
Right.
So what is this third category?
Do you mind sharing specifically where you saw the mention of these in terms of the text?
It's not in this text.
Okay.
It's probably in the Babonka Rinpoche's lam-rim, but where he wouldn't have it anyway.
Okay.
But it would be in the notes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay.
But it's
Yes.
the relation between
Yes.
the aggregates and the
Yes.
afflictive emotions.
Yes. 아니, 녀몬타 sarva.
Nas.
Nyomonta ani pombo, ta saje nyingle pombo. Nigi jawa jawdi ma chungunje kan shores. Te ma chi labrishis. Tadna shungna na peje korante namdu lajana yurshiktu. Ani jundi ngod sing peje jundi ani kare. Uchik dis koran seurji labshing mudus. Tango dita ju yotone sungdi ani di nyomon ju chebale tene saje nyingle pomo de chunggo reseshi. De jundi ton shicha. De jibu ine ya ani pagi saje nyingle pomo tene ya ani pagi le sawata ani nyomon pe adising and this sungutus. The sumbadi ani chik chik di khoran di chik tembe sor shi wat di shima sungsha sarwa chik khoat masuna thanda di khanda ta di sajin ne puma ani nyomol ya tembe sor chik nyomol ya tembe sor shi
o dirwa tembe su ji ro tila de
ati mendo
o ndile ni lu la wa chi yin tomo kon ne jo ko tila de sor pachi ti jo so ro ke shi mendo lu la wa chi yin tomo Delarwa, Nella Wanjushan, and also Luigi Wambotan, Luniba Nashin, Laura, and Timon Kona nature was Kotisam danger. Numun said it's so Tananga to the Sajin Yorlan Pombo Numula then said the Yumodi so dancing location were Timon Kona nature. Timon dancing said the any Sachi Pombo Tama Layama, Chaguer and Yumushan Tamama, Chaguers, that's all the tatila yang na ju kurang mo chu bin do cha ta shi no yo me de do jo yo ro ba an zo ro de kurang gi ju chen che ani nga zo gi sa che gi de cha mo yong go yo re se de ba
dancing ro
dancing de ba da da nyo mo li chong re lai de ji dang zo nyo mo dan de cha dang shi dang de su li jiang zhong ai de yo ba ni ne nga zo pa ta du sa ro de ka de su de mo dancing de to go yo ba dancing da nyo mo su de cha ne pa ta du sa ro de dancing de che ani dancing Quran la tene ta ngazu saji ngala pomutus chong
so when we say or use the term afflictive emotions, obviously there's all types of afflictive emotions, like the ones we just mentioned in terms of attachment, anger, so on and so forth. But the one, when we dive deeper and take things further, it's afflictive emotions can be understood as self-grasping, or the ignorance of self-grasping. And this, again, I'm going to use the word pervade here, and this, because it does pervade anything affiliated or associated to our defiled aggregates and the like. So when we say, as you mentioned, the three, what we would call that, three ways in which they relate. So the first one is through the cause. The second is the result.
They're the cause.
Right? They are the cause.
They're the result.
Yes.
We're talking about the afflicted.
Yes. Yes. So for the cause, so the cause is the afflictive emotions, and then is that between them, or how is that?
It's somewhere here on
okay.
Day 14, the last
Okay.
page. But yes, the afflictive emotions are the result of.
Yes.
Let's start with the aggregates. The contaminated aggregates are a result of the afflictive emotions, but then they also cause the afflictive emotions, obviously, because we're grasping onto the aggregates, and that causes the arise of afflictive emotions.
Yes.
But the third one, and I'm not sure if it's actually stated here, is that they depend on the afflictive emotions, and it bothers me because it sounds like the first one. So
yeah, it does sound very much like the first one. So before we actually jump into that one, again, the point that was we wanted to share is that afflictive emotions, obviously all kinds of afflictive emotions, but the main culprit, if you will, is ignorance of self-grasping, and that's the one that pervades, and then is the true cause of all the following results. But when you use the word depend there, we were wondering if maybe there was a different way to understand that. Typically, when we talk about the three ways of how certain things relate, a lot of the time they're introduced in terms of the cause-result, and then I guess you can call it the definition, or the, give me just a second here. It's called the essence, essential meaning, something like that. So basically, the meaning or the definition of that concept or those concepts. And so we're not exactly clear on the reference to dependent either, because it does very much seem like it's a reference to the cause and result relationship there. But yes. So if we examine or entertain the definition or the essential meaning relationship, if it is explained in that way, for example, let's say it is, most likely one of the ways that it would be explained is by identifying under which category between virtue, non-virtue, and then I heard Tanzala. Neutral. Is that it? Lumate. Is neutral phenomenon? Is that what we call it? Yeah, I'm just looking this up here. So undetermined, unspecified. I think that was the one that translated. So unspecified phenomena. So between virtue, non-virtue, and then unspecified phenomena, which one they would fall under? So if we look at so if we do, if we do, kind of play around with that concept there, for example, the five aggregates can be understood as neutral phenomena. It would be categorized under neutral phenomenon. Hatred and attachment, for example, would be labeled under non-virtuous phenomenon, and then within self-grasping, there are different that can be broken up into both neutral and non-virtuous phenomenon. So that's kind of a structure that we can play with in terms of the definition, or one of the ways that it can be explained, if it is referring to like the essential meaning of the definition between the two.
You mentioned self-grasping could be neutral.
Yes. Yes. 니가 열어봐. 또 미게 왔다 놈한테 니가 열어봐.
단생 몸 주변도 차 영향 열다 왔다.
그래.
단생 몸 주변도 차.
그래. 또 마이머니 아니? 또 보기. 놈한테 차.
그래.
그래. So so if we talk about self-grasping just generally, that can be categorized under neutral phenomenon, and then if there's sometimes a mention of a self-grasping that's also attachment, and if it's that kind of self-grasping, then that would, because with it being attachment, it would fall under non-virtue.
다들 양 접어요다. 너차 뭐 지금 단진 유에서야 돼. 지금 뭐 라마 지금 뭐 건지 지나도 지나 killing 뭐도 맞아. 다 뭐지 이제 killing 되고서 다 벤시 손나라고 이제도 지나고 너차 뭐 지금 단진 유에서로 송요라.
Alright. So, so that becomes a topic of debate. You know, for example, at the monasteries, and depending on the author of the commentaries, some will emphasize that this self-grasping, that's also attachment, does not exist, whereas some other authors will posit or assert that it does exist, that a self-grasping that's both ignorance and attachment exists. So depending on the author, you might get it.
Just to mention something, last week,
Yeah.
it's been bothering me 2 weeks ago actually.
Yes.
Jamie said, remember, said the attachment to the self, and both me and Joseph said, "Oh, there is no such thing." It was asked online. Oh, okay. So he spoke it for somebody who asked the question online, and we shut it down. No, there's no attachment to the self. So, but then I started reading, and I saw many places where it says that there is, just like you said now, there is attachment to the self, but so it's a debatable point.
Right.
But nevertheless, so he was not totally off base there. Whoever was asking that question.
For the sake of conversation again, it was. Could you remind me? It was. So there's no. It was. What were we saying? The previous session we were saying that.
Well, Jamie said that the attachment to the self is what causes the fear of death at the time of death.
Okay.
Yeah, because your self is disappearing.
Yeah.
And we said, no, it can't be that. There's no attachment to the self. It's only attachment. I went even a step further. I claimed that it's only attachment to external objects. It cannot have attachment to the self. That was
during the moment of death, you mean, or
yes,
before death, you mean, right? Was it in that context, right?
Yeah, in that context. The question is, why do people fear death? And he said that at that moment you fear death because of the attachment to the self.
Yes,
and we said, both of us, we said, oh, there's no attachment, such a thing as attachment to the self. And I went even a step further to say that all the attachment is to external objects. So obviously that's debatable.
I see. Oh, okay. 단지 뭔지부터 이제 세셔로.
네.
아니 가서 디 제밀을 돼서 막 가서 봐서 계시 좀 그래. 아니 시간 한번 되니 신나 슈 연구에 됐어요 봐.
네.
아니 라니랑 지나리야 달이야 차네. 안 될 때는 되게 지나 슈 연구하랬어. 아니 코니기 되다 되다 말어 와서. 시간 한번 되시나데 아니 셴에 밖에 치다 뭐보다 하야 더 셴에서 다 많이 뱉다 셴이야 차네다. 다들 같이 제주도 선대쇼 딜 셴에 딜 차네. 아니 셴하게 워르스 뭔데 다들 차네 이 말은 이렇게 쇼사. 다니 계시 다니 달을 차버 때니 지난데 용기가 차시나. 다든지기 달을 차버셔로. 근데 아니 단다 밖에 디샤기나스. 디샤기나스. 더 뭐지 단지 샤유나스.
너 샤모지부 단지더라.
디샤기나스.
너 샤모지부 단진스 되잖아요. 도스타우지리다. 율 차버디. 얘들아.
오케이. Give us a moment. No, it happens when I accidentally unmute on the device, and then the whole thing happens with the audio. Sorry, but I'm now, I muted the phone, and I think we're back. So yeah, Woser.
너 샤모지부디 샤기나 도스샤야 돼가지고. 유이도 원단다 데스 된리 영어 초부 이지르와. 더 저도 유이도 뭐지다 미니르와. 티 그럼 왜네 초바 증기가나? 아니데 너 샤샤고 알았어. 그래서 샤게
Geshe Shaoyina.
Geshe Shaoyina. So that you don't carina. That you delay any quality migrova. Me with the crown when it true to you. Crown when it true to you, but that the shading when the troop and sing you. And the dancing chat over the chashan over.
So, if we're to posit an example of a self-grasping that's also attachment, it would be understood as seeing something as pleasant, and through that perception, becoming attached to it, but then also, with that basis of being attached to it, seeing it as existing inherently. So, with those two factors combined, that would be, if we're to say that there is such a phenomenon of self-grasping that's both ignorance and attachment, that's how it would be described. Yes.
다 말을랑에서 가려고 그러면은 나바카 가려고 그러다. 단진라도 산에 가려 유유랑은 주버진 생도스. 되차세야지 그런 유이동을 나바 저런 나가위 나바로 유이동으로 제선 따딩 나바마라 니래요 되잖아요. 아니 되차고 저기 단진 샤투 말을랑에 저로 되게 리바땅이 소가르땅 거스. 단진스도 저도 유유랑은 주버진 나바샤고도. 아니 되차스도 산 저로 유이동을 나바샤고 되냐고디. 아니 나바 진단 로지리아 나범들 뭐라 인샤가 말아왔어. 근데 인자요 말했어.
So, and then if we're to from the view of those who do not accept a self-grasping that's both ignorance and attachment, but just but only recognize that as ignorance, such authors would they assert that point by saying that they can't be both, or self-grasping, there can't be a self-grasping that's both ignorance and attachment, because of the different manifestations of I guess you call it the different focuses or objects of how they arise. So when it comes to self-grasping, you're seeing something as inherently existent, as unreliant on other things, so on and so forth. Whereas when you're attached to something, you're seeing it as pleasant. So those two, seeing something as pleasant versus seeing something as inherently existent and independent, those are two different ways of viewing. So, so they would assert that no, they can't be both. For those who do not accept that. So we have a few questions online. The first one is, I thought the explanation of conditioned was beneficial with respect to what it is that one should be aware of. I've never heard this word explained. Thank you. Okay, so it's more of a comment. Yes, in the context of the three sufferings, I believe that's what it's referring to, in terms of suffering of. I'm sorry, what was it? It was a conditioned. Of conditioning, conditionality.
Conditioning.
Yeah.
Suffering
Of conditioning. Yes.
Of
But
conditioning.
yes. 그런데 condition은 무슨 말?
Conditioning 안돼 다 지단 가려.
알레.
텐션으로 그래.
알레 말했다. 야구 중스러.
나스.
어제도 돈 제시 등에 숨기 돈 대수 제시 잡으러.
알레.
어디 야구 중 등에 아니 코란테 지 코라 코 전다 코디 테스 사브르시 신선 투시사.
알레. 디 숨디 준데니 연중 제발에 고그래. 장주지 신세월에 고그래. 동반이 고 다나가서 송가도 고그래 디 다토네 앞으로요레스라. 동행원데 덴릭 따기 고그래 디 있잖아서 레니에이션 진짜 삼단돈 덴릭 따 펜토로 와. 연중 제알라는 야스 거의 너무 송가 나자트 신앙 연중 제알 펜토로 와. 딜레 탄도 지그로 와. 장주지 신공발라네 아니 다른 고그로 와다. 라진 탄주기 된도다. 단다 동안 송디 삼담바이나 디 제산 디 송디 신야도 계시모래
Mhm.
능연용 장생한 다음에 다 송가 야부시 영화나 동은 송디 맞아 야부시
All right. So yes, the concept of the three sufferings, or the three types of sufferings, or the three forms of sufferings, are essential to practice, and they can be, or they must be, incorporated into the practice of all three principal aspects of the path, in terms of generating renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom, realizing emptiness. And so, yes, familiarization with those is very important.
된 도시마데
든진다 폼보다 뇨모니 땐단 틴수 강이남스 저서마 티 레샤사
나스
땐단 틴수 강이남스 땐단 틴수 수디 어디 코란다 라르메기 단셔와
나스
어디 라고르스 쉐브레
아네
폼보다 뇨모 땐단 틴수 강이남스 땐단 틴수 수디
땐단 댄스다다래 존지도 당들어 네 폼무스에 당은 사진여는 폼부도 삼당여로
라
사진여는 폼부 칸이버티 아니 녀몽 다 녀몽 다 조다 드몰라 때는 총부용에서 때는 댄스
So Tenzala was letting us know in Tibetan. It was re-emphasizing your initial question about that dependent, that referred to dependency or the dependence between the two. And so the way that they depend on each other is through that relationship of cause and result. It's neither specified as contaminated aggregates exist depending on afflictive emotions. There is attachment to self called Dharma-activity. Dharma-activity yoris. 아니, Dharma-activity yoris.
나 잡았네
가생딜라 된서 거기 시간을 한번 거기 믹스하게 되토.
알아
네.
시간마다 온다는데 디세션 나는 이게 디 ninga 용축으로 와 가시지 아니 수수 뱉다나 연조 내고 전에 수수 다다 차네 다 뱉다나 지 내고 전에 차봐 내용으로 와 아니 신이만 로 내용으로 가시지 한 수수 다 내만데 채웠을게만도 이내야 땅에 지부로 단테지 다 디어드 스차나 카트네요 지 콘솔을 차치는데요 근데 찌리 봐요 말아 니가 용축
So, Tenzin was sharing that there is attachment to the self, generally speaking. When we go back to the last session in the conversation we have with Jamie, it was in the context of, in that moment of death, or where, the cause of that fear, that great deep fear. That depends, Yeshama was mentioning that this depends on their perception during that time, or what it is that you're attached to. Some might be like, okay, well, I really want to stay. I don't want to go. The key word being I, right? So I really don't. I'm scared because I feel like I'm disappearing. For example, like I would like to prolong myself. And then some, it's like, well, okay, it could be like, okay, I'm going, but I'm more concerned about my children, or my belongings, or my possessions. And so an attachment to the external, outside of oneself, can be the other focus. And so it could be attachment to other things or other individuals, and then to oneself as well. Bob is sharing that attachment to the self at the time of death is the fear of extinction. 아니, 법기 들어와래.
거기서 미 말하는
at the time of death, dire dalach shudu sambala dalach aisharwa
나스
되니 건지다 차선 딱 나시한테 배 차선 봤다 매워 차도 배 동줘야 그 된 리고르스
나스
봐
나스
조진한데 아니 다다 배 자원인데 지금 무슨 짬에 계시지 말다 자원인데 매워 차이셔 말아
나스
어디를 쉐워르스
나스
스르
나스
근데 진짜
나스
Okay, so we can go through does anyone else have any questions? If not, there were a couple things that came up while reading that that we were hoping to share as well. So we'll move forward with the next couple pages of the commentary. If you turn to page 38, in the middle there are the methods for developing bodhicitta. And when we talk about the methods, as explained here in the commentary, there are two methods, and the first is the method called the six causes, or the causes and result, or the six causes and the one result. And this is a method inherited by the great Shantideva. I'm sorry, the six causes and one result was by Acharya Sangha and inherited from Maitreya. And then the second, which is called exchanging and equalizing and exchanging self for others, goes back to the great Shantideva, who inherited this method from Manjushri through Arya Nagarjuna, as mentioned there in the first paragraph. And to better understand these two methods, comprehensive and extensive explanations are offered in both the lam-rim, or the Great Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, by Lama Tsong-Khapa himself, and then also Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, the one that we refer to often during our sessions by Pabonga Rinpoche. So one of the sin, so we hope you had the opportunity to read these few pages, and something particular that we wanted to share was a combination or the explanation of the method of combining both of these methods, or the technique, if you will, of combining both of these methods of developing bodhicitta.
Mashi tenden dos che tanda ale down hore tatu mashi tenden tenso yongi shambara o shiba to tla ne ningala dos dajenya ji gongbi na ya ani ti ngala bonchera mashi tenden tenso yongi shambara to kanga zo menga junu de ma de dos toy na dajenya ji gongwa ina ti pato ninga dos gong anti sound ladies and the product and Dajinyamji said Ra Dajinyaji was Sano Yabolena energy on the Legra
Tambushi the Gabla
the new London Roach Concha.
I knew those.
And the Gala Castano going at the occasion of Chagura or at the Tomo Chomba in the Manshi of the town of Hongo. The thing was the Jilman and Sumbara, seeing only Loconia way my Cheton, Tanyo.
Yes. 당부 시드가 만도 냠도 진이도 겁나셔봐.
냥도 란다 코란랑 공으로
알레 코랑
다시 시바 용거 장바 레온데 아니 다시 냥지 연공
어디야 또 신의 또 시야죠.
아니 니지 라삼도 스마 루비나 라 디바로 다시 냥지 시바 있나 보다.
So if you have the chance to read, you'll see that both of these methods are explained individually, but if we refer to the technique of combining them, what is explained is that firstly, actually, whether it be practicing either method individually or combining them, what's important to cultivate first is great equanimity as the basis, and then start with understanding all sentient beings such as mothers and so on and so forth. For example, if we're focusing on the 6 causes and 1 result, so with equanimity being the basis of both, one can meditate and practice on either one individually or both methods together. And when it comes to incorporating both methods together or combining them, the first, if you look at page 39, under the 6 causes and 1 result there, if you look at the 6 causes, causes 1 through 4, when you're combining both the 6 causes and 1 result with the equalizing and exchanging oneself for others, you can do that through by going through the first of these 4 individually, and then once you get to starting from the 5th, or wishing all sentient beings to be free from suffering, or also known as compassion, once you get to that, you can start incorporating the concept and the thought of equalizing and exchanging oneself for others from the 5th step there, while focusing individually on the 4 before that. So basically 1 through 4, practice them individually, cultivate them individually, and then once you get to the 5th, you can incorporate the equalizing and equanimity, equalizing and exchanging oneself for others, starting from there. And so that's a technique of combining both of them when using them or when practicing them together.
아니 단단디나로가 좀 리부스야데 신제샤도 디송당디 남르랑 정송당 시제지 주레샤스.
And then so if you look again on page 39, if you look at the 6 causes and then you look at the result here that's mentioned is bodhicitta, and this explanation or this form of explanation is one that's specified and specifically used in the liberation. In liberation in the palm of your hand.
Tantra.
Woser.
Tene tanda laring chamona lolaina. Nijiti dishara. Gane ba mashi tenden tenzu yongi chambati juche. Tiniji da juche sutiche. Ra nijiti dibuche sutiche. Tene ane 장주지 하상다 장주지 쓰인데서 니지 디부che 수 모두 되는 순간.
And then so the structure that we're looking at here is explained in the liberation of in the palm of your hand, and then if we look at the explanation or of how it's broken down in the lam-rim chamul, then it can be broken down by seeing the first 5, 4. The first 4 being the causes which bring about the result of compassion. And then 그리고 laksamta
사삼도 장주가
선생님.
쓰는
주주 알로
니지디 타고 전부 자와레스.
어르
니지 전부디 타고 전부 랑지 자와노디 니지 전부자.
어제
아니 셴바가네야 마시 텐텐 텐소 이용우 참바여라 시디 니지 전부 주체야.
주체 다
아니
치마니
파삼당 장주지
samni
생기거든.
아니
이제
예주부르스.
좀
Alright. So the first four being the cause of the fifth, which is compassion, and then the fifth compassion being the cause of the sixth, which is taking the responsibility to relieve all sentient beings of their suffering, and then bodhicitta. So if you kind of look at it, as if we look at page 39 as a chart, the first four being the cause of the fifth, and then the fifth being the cause of the sixth and the result, bodhicitta. Or the sixth and bodhicitta can be seen as a result of compassion, which is the fifth there. So the way that it's kind of broken down is a variation, is a specific variation mentioned by Lama Tsongkhapa in the lam-rim Shamu.
대체 대해서 나와서 니지 전부 제원데 아마 태워 전부 리세용 그랬어 버렸어. 니지 전부 태워 전부 싸워도 자기요래. 대체원데 아니 신경 가서 태워 전부 리세 봤어 지금어래. 근데 장주 신 제원데 다 대체 람주 자루어라.
So great compassion, when cultivated or realized, is the symbol or the marker, if you will, of having
리세.
looking for the right words here.
택시
리세.
리세 된들 인죠. 리세가 된다네.
So, yeah, the mark of the awakening of the mind of the Mahayana, or the mind lineage. Is that what we say? Is that how it's translated? Tekjin Rik Seva. Tekjin means the Mahayana, or the greater vehicle, and Rik means I don't know, lineage.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah,
Buddha
something
lineage.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the awakening of that
lineage really.
is marked and can be understood when developing that.
It's not bodhicitta, but it's awakening of
Yes,
Yes,
yes. Great compassion activates Mahayana lineage. So that's, I know we talked about a lot when it's a start, or what is it, what signs do we look for, right? That things like that have come before. How do you call yourself a Mahayana, lineage practitioner, or how do you actually, how do you know when you're actually practicing Mahayana or on the Mahayana path? It's through the development of great compassion, and not just regular or any compassion. It's great compassion.
Yeah, I remember it was during one of the Sunday teachings, Geshe mentioned that, I think he said, arhats or something can have great compassion, or there's a debate between that.
Yes.
So they're finally beginning their Mahayana path.
Yes.
Is it true?
Yes. 아니 가장 숨주 값이래요. 아니 니랑 다시 무슨 말? 이제 참 연애고 지고 내리시가 뒤쳐서 왔어. 어디 인사로 왔어?
한데네 단다데 지르무시 단다데 치면데 나린 처모나로라이나 메가 준리 드마세 저러한테 준리 세당데 아니 가르서 도스치 그럼미세기 조비스 조장처럼 조장데 신제를 때는 지금 뭐 준리기 참아치 되네 신제데 사상을 땡겨 뭐 준리 참아치 사상데 니지 첨부를 땡겨 뭐 참바 니지 첨부데 아니 용게 첨바데 아니 가래 마시 텐소로와 텐소데 텐텐데 아니 마시라 어떻게 준리 참바 도스 쳔로 쳔냐 준리 드마 도스 세탄로 지데 나니 쳔모데 지단데 아니 가서 꾸지 쳔모다 아니 초치는 거기 사 조정바도데 다 타보시면 란치림바 타르마 쳔부터 도스 지단 도스 요래 디다바이나 고아 쳔부요다 펜도 쳔부요레스
지단 시엔치로
라스 지단 시엔스나 다코지 도스 쳔바 쳔 손나도 어디제 도산 디간 삼담바이나 doing the toast down to road.
So So according to the way that the 6 causes and result are explained and shared by Lama Tsongkhapa, and the lam-rim are as
six causes and results lie on Menga Jundi Duma la water. Jundi Duma la disana, somebody in social Duma Lido, on this Jundi Menga Duma la disan, cause the Lamano.
So
7.
yes. So the explanation would have us change the title of the 6 cause and result, and it would be understood as 7 cause and result, 7 sets or 7 pairs of cause and result, and that is because it can be seen as, or it's explained as, great enlightenment being the result of bodhicitta, so that's 1 pair, and then bodhicitta being the result of taking responsibility, or the 6th cause there, and then you keep going up like that. So enlightenment coming from bodhicitta, bodhicitta coming from taking responsibility for all sentient beings, the taking responsibility coming from compassion, and so each pair of cause and result there, if you combine, or if you pair them up in that way, it would be 7, starting from enlightenment. So they would go in pairs of 7, and so instead of the name or the title of this method being the 6 causes and 1 result, it would actually be like the 7 pairs of cause and result. Yes. Yes. So here is exactly as mentioned in. If we were to use these 2 texts as our root references, liberation in the palm of your hand, and then the lam-rim shemo. In the lam-rim shemo, there's the reference to Buddhahood being the final result. Yeah. Whereas here, bodhicitta is a dimension result. So different sets of causes and effects, or a set, or the sets of cause and, or 7, if you will, sets of cause and result, starting from the ultimate result and going up that way. So maybe there's a greater scope in the context of cause and result in the explanation in the lam-rim shemo, where the result is the ultimate result, the final result of Buddhahood, rather than stopping with the result stopping at bodhicitta, and then specifically just honing in on the causes for bodhicitta.
And this is what makes it 7 causes.
Right.
Because you add the 9.
Right. So if you actually yeah, so you go in pairs of cause and result, right? So yeah. Yeah, so if we we would encourage you to refer to the lam-rim shemo to see, to look at this specific section to see how it's broken down. But in Tibetan, again, the terminology is 7 sets, 7 particularly. Here is 6 causes and 1 result. Obviously, it's, the total is 7, but the specific term is 7 is not brought up, or is not mentioned, whereas in the lam-rim shemo it's actually the 7 sets or 7 pairs of cause and result. or cause and effect, and then it starts with Buddhahood being the result of the cause, which is bodhicitta, and then the bodhicitta being the result of the cause, which is, and then you kind of take it up from there.
Tini to Sudamara, Larin Chamadan, Seadan, this Yamamuchi, those Jibu Sonsons.
And so during Rinpoche's teachings, he has referred to this particular structure of cause and result in terms of the 7 pairs, so it's the 7 sets. So Yushamwa is sharing his personal experience, having received teachings from Rinpoche, and this is what Rinpoche shared with him, not necessarily when he was teaching here to GSTDL students, but yeah.
We have
Joseph, I'm wondering if you saw the very concept that you brought up that came up in the teachings, whether hearers and solitary realizers had great compassion, not that difference between immeasurable compassion and great compassion is actually mentioned here as well. I think on page, I was wondering if you had seen it. It's on page 42. Is it 42? So yeah, at under 5 there, the bottom paragraphs. So that concept is actually explained here as well. Just for your reference there. Of immeasurable versus great, and then how, yeah, and how I think maybe possibly we discussed how or whether or not hearers and solitary realizers had great compassion or not.
But here the explanation is different from elsewhere. So they're different, obviously. Well, according to this here, it says that immeasurable compassion means that it shares immeasurable beings as object of meditation, does not assume all sentient beings as the object of meditation. I've heard that, I remember from Geshe Gyeltsen, that's exactly what, but yeah. I'm not sure if that really, that's not the only way, and it really doesn't quite make sense, because
what do you think?
Well, the other one is that the great refers to the object, and no, 2 things: the object being all sentient beings, just like immeasurable. They both refer to all sentient beings, but the difference between great and immeasurable is that the great includes the desire to take the responsibility for alleviating their misery. It's not just that. So
it's not just the number of, or the
not
amount
just the number is not what distinguishes these two. It's the same number, all sentient beings, not some.
Okay.
Like it says, the example here is given as the not all sentient beings in many realms of existence. That,
right.
That's not very. Doesn't sound very.
So
right.
Can you repeat that other portion? How you mentioned
the opposite.
Then it doesn't end there. It actually refers to
the great compassion has to do with all sentient beings, or the objects, and the intention is the desire is to alleviate their suffering, their misery.
Yes.
Okay. Whereas the immeasurable compassion, it's the same object, all sentient beings, but there is no this desire to alleviate. But even though it's not yet taking the responsibility, it's not the superior intention yet. But nevertheless, there is a desire.
So you mean that compassion being the cause for this desire to alleviate them of their suffering, or is it somehow? Is it combined in the intention?
Yeah, that's what great compassion is. It includes these 2 elements.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not the number of sentient beings, like the way it's explained here.
samje thamjila ani phagi ningje to komnangyo marasa samje mangcha dagi ani danda dino Los Angeles ne to shwa yara se da me di konji samje chang manyu shma so me di chibo inji mares shwa ko ningje chambo sude sama hak점 단계 되고 싶고 ningje yima sam mase ro 야 니가 코니 니가 집어res ro samje thamjila ani ningje yores ro samje thamje ani 등에단 전두기 섬로 여르스 길로 여르스 때직 아니 니주 샴보스도 많이 학점 단체 되어서 아니 다기 차우선 셔로 닌제단 전데 거자 등에단 전데 다기 차세요 셔로 이 코너 어디 여르스 지구도 얘는 아니야 미야 디 samje thamjil 미고 여르스 마데 samje thamjil 용어 서시 때 참만요 마레스 이 밖에 학점도 요 마레스 직 학점 단체 되어서 어디 차네 레스 공개
틱 그런 수만 더우지 나는 참 더우지 레고 왔다 나중에 저거 진짜 되고 같더라 나는 참 나눠라 나네 가스를 내려라야 내투도랑 상지들래 니지 참고요 말했을 때 루제도 나도 더우지 거야다 다산맵에서 다산맵에 루제서 루지 거야다 그러와 아니 간선아 아니 내려도 저기 네 신경 동을 또 차와대 다기 차와냐고 코르 램베 지리어와 어디요 말했을 때 더우지 송어요래 그런 때 더우지 송어요래 이내한테 아주 나주 생년 한주 동안 저 다기 차왔어야 돼 다산민 송거로 다산인 쓰고로 저림바 더우지 요라 다산민 쓰고로 그런 송거 더우지 나는 참 더우지 요래다
so similar to how you differentiated the two with it not just being the amount of beings that one has compassion towards, but with it being the desire to free them from that suffering. Similar to this explanation can be found in the lam-rim where Lama Tsong-Khapa alludes to the hearers and Pratyeka Buddhas lacking this determination and this desire, if you will. Kind of on the general conversation, when you look at the order, you like the one that we just went through of the 6 results, typically this, or according to this kind of structure, this aspiration to free others comes after the compassion, which would mean there's a clear layer between them, or there's a clear what do you call that gap between them, but
ina goma ijanalo tarang re laring sisin do yor goma ijanalo nyentu de la ni chang yor se war ina nyentu la ni chang yor res ina ya kunzu la gares sana de yo ma la kudu le me ni chang de yo ma res ta la sang do ju yo ma res war anda laring chang mo si ju yor ane laring chang mo na lo tanda ane tagi nyentu la nyentu da rang sang ji la so ni chang yo ma res ne lo je ko do wa te si ta rang ki chen goma kunzu ina ta rang se war
so variations of this particular concept can also arise according to authors of certain commentaries, and these are whose works are mainly make up the body of monastic studies and debate at the monastery, and so the mention here specifically in Geshe's commentary, it uses the root reference of the liberation in the palm of your hand, Pabonga Rinpoche, and a lot of what Pabonga Rinpoche explains are in accordance or in alignment with one of the authors, a specific author, Pension.
Yeah, pension sonna traba tang ta srame isha phaji chi pare. Yeah, srame isha karina.
So I'm sorry. So not pension, but the one that Srame monastery follows.
Pension isha te shin shu re dero. Tejang rom ji tinan ro.
So anyways, it's the primary author that the Sarma monastery follows, and that's why it comes out like this, as heroism Prityagas having, not having great compassion.
Because they don't take all sentient beings.
Because or not having great compassion because they don't take all sentient beings, whereas in the Kunjin, in Giant Shiva, the Gomang, the Tribun Gomang author, that they whose works they follow or they accept, they posit that Yoris, so they do have great compassion, but they don't have this taking on responsibility and this aspiration to be the ones to actually free sentient beings from that. But they do have great compassion. So let's say Penjin Sona Champa, whose works assert that heroes and solitary realizers don't have great compassion. It's a point that he asserts, just not out of not because he just personally feels like it or that it's random. He actually has sources that he refers to for those, including including a quote from Haribhadra. So I'm saying Haribhadra, from the great Indian pandit Haribhadra, and also from and Pramana reference to by Libin Chura. So those are the primaries. Not like yes. So yes. So two quotes and two sources that Penjin Sona Champa refers to, one from Dharma-activity and the one from Haribhadra. And then also there is a reference in the sutras that in which the Buddha mentions the lack of great compassion in heroes and solitary realizers. So there are different sources may be used to assert different points, and sometimes they vary according to authors. So yeah.
So how are they how are these heroes and solitary realizers eventually freed from the solitary peace?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
How are they eventually freed from their solitary peace?
How they're eventually freed?
Mm-hmm.
Tandani Nyaran Tajamanam Ani Shive Tali Jik Pagi Songsiwara the Shive Tali the Negor Ani Tinia Tane Nikandis King Kandis Chip King Karachaval ya Tilia Tani Tani Pagi Ithajana Kandishu Wars the Chel.
Sanji this on the Javana Jingole Torn Lara Sanji Giti Consul this Sonda Korean Hongoda. I should this Dema this standard Tavachambalaya Shudus Son. Yeah, Langwares Javana Jingole Torn.
So the Buddhas, or the Buddha, is the one that snaps them out of their abiding in the extreme of ultimate peace, and is the one that encourages them to go a step further in service to sentient beings and actually attain Buddhahood rather than just abiding in bliss, in the bliss of liberation.
But it's not a one-time deal, right? They fall back into it. They're not in home forever. Right? They stay longer in solitary peace than the person who's staying in the deepest hell. Right? Is that true?
아니 상계 나오게 아니 사직 야 도시야 소만섬이 팽기지 말을 컨서 양이야 구 말외스 사직 소만다 컨서 다랑 야 스페 에 셴 센세 아니 도스 다랑 이 샤샤 도와르야 야 양제야 쇼네 아든지 자기나 가네나스 야 사카시시야 요 컨서 랑고 이저버스
하나 가는데
너
세우라 맞아 양 지지 다지마 만나마라 예시로 소도 디카르스니다 kui dongan de chöda chön da don yang yong man de song wo ta chö da kui dongan le ta bare de ine ya dan da chön yang yong sun yang an de be cha sang dan da chön de zo yo mar se wo ro de song go ro de song de zan da ko zo ri pa no yo re ta ji cha ji mo nan ri ji sa
yes so
se wo de thomas
yes so Geshe was mentioning that it's not clearly mentioned in how many times it would take, but probably depending on the arhat. They're probably obviously very capable, great capacities, great intelligence, and so hopefully it wouldn't take more than once. But the way that the Buddha encourages them is by reminding them that they're not completely done. They've only made it a part of the way, that there's still yet to be achieved, and in doing so, they're encouraged to continue.
So Buddha creates some sort of dissatisfaction in them. They're dissatisfied with their state.
Yes.
But how is that possible? They are house. They cannot experience dissatisfaction.
Dissatisfaction.
Yeah, they're not satisfied. In order to develop to something greater, that you have to feel that you're not really up to par. You're not there.
Right,
yet.
right.
So that's an unpleasant state of being, and they cannot experience that.
The Shirana amjin kijar shigar. Tani benda tokara taganzbuta shivetal shu jojin shugaroda.
ngore
Tani sange gema ani das sungurwada. Nan kan zoyo mar das ra. Ani koe tal amada pet yonzu ya zoyo mar. Ya sange mar sra. Antandu jojul hayers ni sungdu sambala. The crowns with the net is shero. That shagale to shero. Shama de delia on the doors on the masimbershi. So was. Oh, did the other the right nation to you had the other to take remedos and this masimber sone. Ani ya, because ya shang here was. Ani the country's demolition that the Teba masimber to the shive, the Guski, and the Tinjiskan. So, you are a sunny the country's chick Teba masimber country's givers. The Kabushu Marvis.
티 가서 또 생으로 앞에 시시나 가서 사제지간 대회 카트에 지원도 총연의 랑기 로카 용주 제사기 랑 라마기 신이 지금 뒤천들 지우전 대마디 단다처럼 내가 하신 뭐 재미있는 로바 제와 조선은 이 로에시기로 하면서 인샤샤 채널도 지레마도 이거 단단들 지우도 되게 나요 말로
거기도 기분 매우 계죠 말로
지우 매우 계죠 말이다 그 산지 칸 라지마도 산지는 효지라고
So Jampa was giving us an example, and so yes, correct. It's not easy to develop a dissatisfaction. In fact, they're not necessarily developing a dissatisfaction with the state of liberation. It's more of a willingness to listen to the teacher or to the guide. For example, we can be having a great time, just basking in the sun, kicking a ball around, whatever. But if our teacher, let's say our spiritual teacher says, "Hey, Vladimir, come inside, read here, you do your homework," then you're still going to come in and do your homework, but you're not going to necessarily say, "Okay, oh, this is like sunbathing's, I'm done with it. You still recognize that sunbathing or whatever you were doing before that was a pleasant experience, and you don't refute the pleasant experience, but you still will come inside and do your homework because you were asked to do so or were told to do so. So likewise, yes. So, let me see. Okay, so, so we're 10 minutes past 9. We'll stop there for today. But before we stop, let me read a couple of messages here on the chat. Buddhists wake them up from peace of nirvana and advise them to follow bodhisattva paths. So following in the Buddha's advice. Rather than kind of a reluctance or dissatisfaction, it's more a willingness to listen to the Buddha's advice. Buddha shows enlightened powers that are greater than theirs and inspires them to be like them. Inspires, rather than discourages, or kind of, pouring, what's the term? What's the word? Raining on a parade or something like that, right? So encouraging and inspiring. Yeah. So we'll stop there for today. And so, if you could read individually verse 8 and its commentary, we'll be going through that next week. Please also understand, though, that we can, if you have any questions about any previous parts of the text, please know that you're welcome to ask and bring those topics of discussion into the conversation as well. But for next week, we'll be focusing on verse 8. Let us dedicate our merit, the merit that we've accumulated together here and by participating in the session today. For those of you with a hard copy of the text, please turn to page 69. And then for those of you online, please refer to the PDF that's in the main chat box. Or actually, I think it's at the end of the PDF text as well, page 69. I apologize. Let us dedicate our positive energy to the flourishing of Buddha Dharma throughout the world. Let us dedicate our positive energy to the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. May his sacred mandalas of body, speech, and mind be unharmed by negative intentions and actions. May he and other great masters be successful in fulfilling their dreams and visions for benefiting all sentient beings. Let us dedicate our positive energy to all spiritual communities throughout the world so that they may flourish in their study, contemplation, and meditation. Let us dedicate our positive energy to the elimination of the problems in our world, such as famine, war, and conflict. May everyone in this and other world systems experience peace, happiness, and harmony. Let us dedicate our positive energy to ourselves and to other Dharma practitioners so that we may overcome all obstacles to spiritual development. Let us dedicate our positive energy to ourselves and to all sentient beings so that we can purify the obscurations to liberation and omniscience and quickly reach full enlightenment. Thank you, and hope to see you next week.